You're listening to Revenge of the Drive-In, the podcast where Jim and Patrick watch and discuss a drive-in double feature consisting of horror films, spy films, exploitation movies, erotic thrillers, sex comedies, and the like. Our ultimate goal is to determine if these two movies, randomly selected from a list of over 1,600, would make for a good drive-in double feature. We will be going through the plots of these movies in detail, so if you're concerned about spoilers, feel free to check them out before listening to us, and we'll be sure to point out if and when these films are available on various streaming services. Be sure to follow us on Twitter for any updates. That's at Drive-In Podcast, no underscores, hyphens, or spaces. And let's get started. I'm your host, Patrick, and I'm joined by...
Jim.
All right, Jim, this episode we've got Universal Studios' Dracula from 1931, the English language version, because there is a Spanish language version from Universal from the same year, actually. And then also The Big Dollhouse from 1971, a returning director for our podcast. It is Jack Hill, the director of Spider Baby.
Yeah, both great movies. One maybe slightly better than the other, at least in my eyes.
Yeah, well, let's start with Dracula then.
Okay.
This is, as I mentioned, a film released in 1931. It, I believe, was released before Frankenstein, so this was... I've heard people say that this is the first sound horror film. I don't actually know if that's true or not. It's definitely Universal's first sound horror film, but I don't know.
And then what would have been the next Universal monster movie after this? The Invisible Man?
The Mummy was 32.
Oh. Well, you know, my favorite Universal monster movie is The Mummy from 1999, starring Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz.
I'm a big fan of the Tom Cruise Mummy.
Oh, get out of here. Take off.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm going to spend that much time on the plot because honestly, the movie doesn't either. This is a movie that's both fast-paced and slow-paced. You might think that doesn't make any sense. It makes sense if you see the movie. Anyways, the movie starts with Renfield, played by Dwight Frye, heading to Castle Dracula in the hills of Transylvania. He's warned about going there with everyone else who's on his coach. You know, they give him a cross and they say, you know, it's a bad idea. They say something about vampires. But he's like, no, I've got business with the Count. So then he gets picked up by another coach because the original coach driver refuses to take him all the way there. And this driver is Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
If you recognize Bela Lugosi, you'll know it. You'll know it right away, but you'll definitely know it when Renfield looks out because he's going to complain about the coach moving too fast, and it's just a bat flying. The flying bats here, they don't look great. I've seen worse, but yeah.
It's a little jarring because you get this in 1931, and 2 years later you have The Invisible Man with amazing effects.
And King Kong as well that year.
Oh, really? Wow. Yeah, and then you get a rubber bat tied to a fishing line or something.
It's like theater level effects.
Yes, yeah.
You know, like you accept these if you're watching it on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of this movie feels like it belongs on stage.
Well, wasn't this adapted from a play? That
Yes,
they did, not the original book?
It's based on Bram Stoker's Dracula, of course, the novel, but more specifically, it's based on a play. And that's actually how they got Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi performed that role on stage as Dracula.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. It's paced like a play. It's not the most exciting. I hate to say it. This is no Invisible Man.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyways, Renfield arrives at Castle Dracula. We get a couple iconic lines here when Dracula bids him welcome, and then he has this whole Children of the Night little thing. And they eventually discuss business. Renfield, I guess, is in the real estate business or land acquisition or whatever.
He's a solicitor of some kind, right?
Yes, because Dracula has recently leased an old abandoned abbey in London called Carfax.
Mm-hmm.
And he's planning on going there with Renfield. They're chartering a ship. Dracula insists he only has a few boxes to bring. And this scene's really great. This is the scene when Dracula offers him wine, and then Renfield's like, don't you drink? And he's like, I never drink wine. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's great. And this is also when Renfield gets a paper cut and there's a little bit of blood and Dracula can like barely control himself. It's great. These two actors, Lugosi and Dwight Frye, make this movie for me, especially later on, at least for Dwight Frye.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this scene that you just mentioned, I mean, it might be one of the most exciting scenes in the movie for me. I mean, after this, it kind of falters here or there, but...
Yeah, this first act is fantastic. The first act in Transylvania is great. The rest of the movie doesn't quite live up to it, I don't think.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of like... This scene is the crescendo, is the ending of the first act. And it just feels so great. It feels so right. This is probably what Dracula, or what fans of Dracula wanted to see, I guess, if there were fans of Dracula in the 1930s.
Of course there were. It's a successful play. What are you talking about?
Well, yeah. I just couldn't see people showing up in like ties or something and being like, oh yes, honey, this is my favorite part. I love this when Dracula's aroused by blood. You know?
Well, we got to point out, again, I have no knowledge of this Dracula play, really. I just know that it exists and Bela Lugosi was in it, and that's how they found him. But in the novel, this part of the novel is actually my favorite stuff, too. And the novel's it's an epistolary novel, so it's told through letters, and it's not like a straight narrative. It has a bunch of different narrators at given points. And you'd think, like, that sounds kind of boring, and... By all means, epistolary novels were way out of fashion in 1897 or whenever this book came out.
Yeah.
That was like a huge thing in like the 1740s. Like, I don't know what Bram Stoker was doing. To be fair, I mean, Stephen King did it with Carrie almost 100 years after this. So
yeah, but Stephen King's cool.
I just remember this stuff being great. But I also remember that Renfield is not in this portion. This character, I mean, Renfield is a character in the novel. In the novel, Renfield is crazy from the start.
Mm.
And this is Jonathan Harker in the novel that goes to Dracula to do Dracula business. But I point that out mostly because Jonathan Harker is just the lamest character in this movie. He just sucks. He's so boring.
Yeah, I agree.
So, later at night, Renfield is visited by a bat in his room, and he faints. And then Dracula appears and... bends down to pick him up, and then we kind of cut. We end up on the ship that's heading to England, and we see that Renfield is stowed away with the luggage, being Dracula's coffin, and we see that he now serves Dracula loyally. He's like under a spell.
Yeah. If you don't really understand Dracula or how he works, you won't really realize that he has this kind of like magical hypnotizing power until later on.
Yeah, he tries it. You get a good visualization of it later on. But that's really late into the movie. That's with like 7 minutes to go, I want to say.
Yeah. Yeah,
because this is another, surprise, surprise. This is another Universal Monster movie, another, 70-minute movie or whatever. I mean, that's just how movies were back then. Imagine if Zack Snyder's Justice League were 70 minutes. The 70-minute movies don't exist anymore.
No, but maybe they should,
I mean, I've seen 90-minute movies that feel 20 minutes too long, At any rate, when the ship ends up in England... it is, quote-unquote, unmanned because everybody operating the ship was killed. And this is a neat scene. I mean, it's kind of an awkward scene, but it's pretty neat in how it's shot because you see the shadows of, like, a dead person or two, a dead crew member, which is kind of neat. And they're all talking like, oh, what's going on? And then they hear Renfield laughing. And the reason I say it's awkward, or it's a little strange, is that the people talking we don't see.
Yeah.
They're just, I guess, behind the camera. But then they open the door and see Renfield there just laughing maniacally. And this is the moment when you realize, like, holy shit, Dwight Frye, man, he is owning this part.
Yeah, he's got, I forget what movie it was that we did recently, but I said that somebody had great crazy eyes.
Probably Hatchet for the Honeymoon, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, that might have been it, yeah. Dwight Frye has great crazy eyes. He's got that great kind of maniacal, insane face. And just his whole way about him, too.
And I'm used to seeing him in, like, Frankenstein assistant hunchback makeup, too. So it's nice that we see him in the opening just as a normal guy. He's dressed normally, fashionably, I assume. But he's just like normal looking. And then from here on out, he's always got a crazy grin. He's always laughing. He's got those wide, bug, crazy eyes. It's great. It's wonderful.
Or, he's trying to eat bugs.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so this next bit we learn about Renfield, we actually learn by reading a newspaper. Because this is back in that era when this is how you transitioned from scenes and gave us exposition. Because we learned that Renfield is now at a sanitarium under the care of Dr. Seward. And the next time we see Dracula, he's just wandering about the streets of London. There's this, like, flower girl or something.
Yeah.
And he just stares at her, and I guess he's seducing her. Or you mentioned the spell earlier, except it's not quite that. But he's, like, seducing her, and then he just goes in for the kiss, but he's really going in for a bite. And then she's dead. And then Dracula shows up at the opera or the theater or whatever.
The weird thing about this flower girl scene is that it almost didn't need to exist. Like, they could have just not included that. It only feels
I think they need something establishing Dracula in London before he just shows up at the opera.
Yeah,
it didn't necessarily
I
need
so.
to be this.
Because the only reason I can think of for them having a scene like that is to remind you that Dracula is an evil person who can kill people.
Well, maybe, but I mean, we haven't seen him kill anyone up until this point.
No, but we have heard that he's
Renfield.
evil, and he does kill people, and he rises out of a coffin, and yada yada yada.
Yeah, normal people sleep in coffins.
Yeah, like Ozzy Osbourne.
It's at this opera scene. This is when Dracula introduces himself to Dr. Seward and Dr. Seward's friends, who are, in this case, his daughter, Mina, and then also her... I don't know if they're dating at this point, but Jonathan Harker, and then her friend, Lucy. We're probably less than a half hour into the movie. We have met every character but one at this point in this movie, basically.
Yeah.
We're just blowing through these character introductions. But it's at this box that Dracula mentions that he's got a lease on the New Carfax Abbey, and they're like, oh, that must be quite a fixer-upper. And he's like, nah, I plan to do very few changes. And then that's kind of it. I guess he charms the women a little bit. We learn later it works better on Lucy than it does Mina, because those two are talking, and Mina only has eyes for Jonathan, but Lucy's like, oh, I think he's kind of cute, like in this weird way. And then like a minute after we meet her, Lucy's dead. Because it's right after that scene with Lucy and Mina talking that Dracula shows up in her bedroom and bites her. And then so it's basically 30 seconds after. I mean, it's like probably 2 minutes after we meet Lucy, she's dead. And then it's like 10 seconds after we learn she's dead, we're like on to the next scene, you know what I mean? Because there's this like autopsy or like examination of the corpse, like in like a university lecture hall kind of thing. Like, I don't know if it's a bunch of doctors looking at this, and they're like, oh, she's dead with the same 2 bite marks on, like, and then boom, we're done. Like, then that scene is over.
Yeah, the weird thing about that scene, because I was re-listening to it, and I think they were operating on her. And it wasn't just like an autopsy thing, because at one point they're like, okay, she's dead. And they said, how many when was the last transfusion you gave her? He's like, oh, like 4 hours ago. He's like, no amount of transfusions could save her. She was drained dry.
Either way, the scene should have been longer than 15 seconds.
Yeah, that scene only existed to introduce Dr. Van Helsing.
Yep. Dr. Van Helsing is our resident vampire expert. He's interested, obviously, in the 2 marks on the neck. And he's also interested in Renfield, who has this creepy fascination with bugs. And, like, the blood that runs within them. And eventually his fascination switches between different bugs. And I think later on it kind of switches to rats. But bottom line is Renfield's a weirdo.
Speaking of animals for a second, why were there possums in the crypt?
Transylvania? There was also a bee.
Yeah, and there was also 2 armadillos.
Yes. I think whoever was the set decorator went out and got the most exotic animals they could find in Southern California, if I had to take a guess.
Yeah. Well,
no, I've always wondered that. Since I was a kid, I'm like, what? Why is there...
Well,
possums are kind of like, they're nocturnal, right? Like,
I
there's
guess
at least
so,
somewhat of a connection. But the armadillos, man, I don't know.
No, well, at first I thought, like, is the possum supposed to be a rat? I was like, were they hoping people didn't know what possums were or what possums looked like? And then, then there's like the bee crawls out of its own mini coffin or something. Like it crawls out of like a piece of wood.
Yeah. So Dr. Van Helsing examines Renfield's blood and finds traces of vampirism or whatever. We've got, I don't want to say a scientific explanation for vampirism, but we've at least got in this movie's universe there is a scientific explanation. We don't get that explanation, but it's there, I guess.
Doesn't he scare him with the wolfsbane?
Yeah, he pulls out the wolfsbane because this is when he actually gets a chance to meet Renfield. And I think it's at this point too that we learn that Renfield's probably been sneaking out at night, like every night.
Yeah.
And Renfield's in his like cell, and Dracula shows up outside his window and just stares at him. He's like telepathically communicating with him because Renfield is responding. He's like, "Oh no, don't make me do that." And that scene doesn't really go anywhere because because the next scene is Dracula goes to seduce Mina.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were in this scene that they were talking about Mina. They never used the name.
Yeah, and we learn about Renfield doing things for Dracula, but we never see those things.
Right.
We have no clue what those things are. For all we know, he could just be like distracting the people of the Seward household while Dracula does stuff. I don't know.
Well, we know he's not cleaning up because we see Carfax Abbey later. Renfield hasn't brought out a broom or anything.
No.
Yeah, I think as much as I like Renfield here, like how crazy Dwight Fry is, and really it's the kind of intensity and the energy that you don't see in a lot of performances from this era.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only actor that really could have matched him, again, from this era, probably would have been like Peter Lorre, but he was out in Germany at the time doing M. So, yeah, I don't know, but Dwight Fry is great, but he's no longer really a part of the story at this point. I mean, he fucks up massively towards the end. We can get to that. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen him integrated a little bit better in the story. But anyways, Dracula shows up at Mina's, I'm going to say house, but I think the house and the sanitarium are the same place, right?
Yeah, I think the house is connected to the sanitarium.
Yes, it has to be because Renfield just like goes in and out.
Wanders in.
Later on. Yeah, this reminds me of like a Jersey Shore house or something. Like it's just like, how many people live here? Because we pretty much always see Jonathan here. Well, Van Helsing, I guess, makes sense if he's doing something with the sanitarium. Yeah, Jonathan's the one that doesn't make a lot of sense here, I guess.
No, but he's in love with Mina, so he has to be close by.
And then there's that Cockney guard guy.
Yeah, the handler, I guess you could call him.
Yeah, so Dracula shows up as Mina's describing her terrifying dream, and all of a sudden she's interested in him, even though we saw earlier that she really wasn't. Something's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And I would also like to point out that, vampire lore of a vampire has to be invited in. This movie doesn't follow that. He just kind of shows up whenever.
Yeah.
Which, it's fine. Every movie has its own rules, every universe has its own mythos.
Is there only one vampire movie before this, and that would be Nosferatu?
I don't know. I mean, Nosferatu is, to my knowledge, the only adaptation of Bram Stoker before this, but I don't know if it's the only vampire movie that predates this. I think the movie Vampire, spelled with a Y, I think that comes out in 1932. I think that's after this. That's like a Danish or... it's like a Danish or German or Dutch. It's Carl Theodor Dreyer, the guy that did The Passion of Joan of Arc. That movie's it's mostly a silent movie, and I think it was lost for like something like 30 or 40 years, but it's still out there and it's incredible. And I think that's why it's silent. I think the sound portions were lost.
Oh.
I think that was after this.
When you said vampire, spelled P-Y-R, I was like, no, this has got to be a joke, because this sounds like some edgy goth vampire movie from like the late 90s.
I mean, it's like the German spelling for vampire or something, or
yeah.
the Dutch spelling for vampire, whatever the hell weirdo European country that movie's from. But you mentioned Nosferatu. We get a Nosferatu title drop in this movie.
Yes, we do, yeah.
Is Nosferatu, like, that name, does that mean anything other than that movie? Is that, like, a mythological term that
I don't think so.
The Murnau movie?
I don't think so. Here, I'm going to Google it real quick.
If so, that's it, or if not, rather, that's a pretty... That's kind of like a flex, because that movie Nosferatu notoriously it's an adaptation of Dracula, but Bram Stoker's widow was alive at the time and didn't want them to have the rights to make that into a movie, so they just changed the names. That's why they get to the name Nosferatu. They wanted to call him Dracula, and and so it's like whoever wrote that line in is like, oh yeah, this is the real Dracula. We can talk shit about Nosferatu.
I just looked it up, and the term has been around since at least 1865 in the German language, and it is synonymous with vampire or vampiric creatures.
Okay.
But I definitely think they were pulling a movie reference.
So as Dracula is at this Jersey Shore house, he meets Van Helsing. And Dracula mentions something like, oh, even in Transylvania we've heard of you. So like he knows who Van Helsing is, and he knows he's this vampire expert guy.
Yeah.
And so he knows he's a threat, but he's still impressed with how clever Van Helsing is. In this scene, Van Helsing gets Dracula to come near him, and he's like, hey, I want you to show you this thing. And as he opens it up, it's a mirror. Dracula just slaps it out of his hand, which I love that moment. And then Dracula's like, oh, I'm sorry. He's like, I can't stand seeing my reflection in the mirror. And he's like, and he turns to Dr. Seward and Jonathan and Mina, and he's like, Dr. Van Helsing will explain why. And so he's like, he doesn't give a fuck. Like, he's like, Van Helsing's going to tell him I'm a vampire. I don't give a shit. Like, like I can't outwit this guy.
Yeah, my favorite part is after that scene, he just slowly walks out. There's no run. There's no, like, oh, I'm going to
he runs away as a wolf.
He does, yeah.
We don't see that, of course, but yeah, and this is also when Mina starts to kind of distance herself from Jonathan, which I can't blame her. That character is boring as hell, and the actor is boring. Not that Mina's that much better, but, I mean, Jonathan just sucks. So at this point, Mina's health is failing, and Dr. Van Helsing says the only way they can save her is if they find Dracula's place of rest and they slam a big old stake through his heart. Yeah. And here's where I'm thinking, why the fuck did he tell them where he lived the minute he met them? Dracula, you dumbass. And then it's kind of a pointless scene, but it's enjoyable because, again, it's Dwight Frye. He wanders into the house section of the sanitarium, and he starts talking about this weird vision he had that's of like a red fog, which is sort of in the novel Dracula shows up as like this mist. And so it's kind of a reference to that. And then there's also like a bunch of rats, and it's not really important, but I want to mention it because Dwight Frye just kicks ass in this scene. He's so insane. He makes a woman faint at one point just from laughing.
I think this is also the scene where like he's talking and he does something with his hand that is really, really amazing, where he has it on his chest and one of the doctors asks him something, but he sort of slides his hand down from his chest to his waist in this really like unnatural way. I can't even describe it, but I was just entranced by watching him act on screen.
Oh, he's so great. He's so great in his speeches, in his eyes. It's just a fantastic performance. Like, I mean, Dwight Frye also, of course, was in Frankenstein. He's in, I think he's like a minor role in like Bride of Frankenstein or something. I think he's like an uncredited extra in The Invisible Man. He's like in all those like early 30s Universal monster movies. But I really think like he's just so great in this movie that if this was the only movie he had ever made, the name would still mean something to a certain amount of weirdos out there, you know? He's just like this role has like cult icon written all over it. Mm-hmm. So Dracula shows up again, and this time he talks again to Van Helsing, and or I think Dracula's like, oh, you're going to pull out some wolfsbane, aren't you? Because this is when Dracula's trying to, like, put his trance on him, where he's just giving him those, like, long, creepy stares and sticking out his arm in a kind of a beckoning way. It's really well performed by Bela Lugosi. He's just got a great stare. But instead of pulling out wolfsbane, Van Helsing pulls out something that's much more powerful, and it's a crucifix. And it gets Dracula to kind of hiss and turn away in a very theatrical way, but I love it.
I also really like this scene because it's kind of like these two greats butting heads in just the room of a house. And there's that great line where I think Dracula says, you should go back to your own country. And Van Helsing says, I actually quite like it here, and I want to protect the people from you. Dracula says something else to him, but Van Helsing responds with, I'm going to excavate, or he said, I'm going to pull Carfax Abbey apart brick by brick and excavate the entire thing just to find your dirt and destroy it, or something like that. And I was like, wow, this guy's such a badass. He's really giving Dracula what for.
And I don't remember if it was this scene or earlier with the mirror, but Dracula has this kind of knowing grin, and he says the line, for someone who has not lived a single lifetime, you are wise beyond your years. I love that line. That's probably my favorite line in the movie. So there's like a little bit of humor in there. It's like like Dracula's lived more than one lifetime. Van Helsing's this old ass dude.
Yeah.
But he's still young to Dracula, you know? Because, of course, it's Edward Van Sloan, who was also a doctor in Frankenstein. He was Dr. Waldman, I think was his name.
Yeah, that was his name, yeah.
It's kind of the same performance in both movies. I probably like him a little better here, but I think that's just because there's more for the character to do in this movie, yeah. So this around here is also when Mina and Jonathan are talking, and then a bat comes in, and as Jonathan's trying to shoo away the bat, Mina is talking to it and responding to it. And so it's very clear, obviously, that she's, if not transitioning, she's a vampire at this point, I think, or something. And then we head to our very, very, very unexciting climax as Jonathan and Dr. Van Helsing follow Renfield when he sneaks out of the sanitarium one night, and he heads to Carfax Abbey. And then Dracula, who's got Mina there, sees that Renfield has brought other people there, even though Renfield didn't bring them. He was just followed. Dracula gets pissed and strangles Renfield. And this is probably the last part of the movie I actually enjoy. And it's not just because, no more Dwight Fry. It's just like from here on out, it's just like Dracula hides in his coffin.
Yeah.
And then gets killed off screen. It's like the lamest end. Because they're in the crypt area, and they're looking for both Mina and Dracula. Jonathan's more interested in finding Mina. Van Helsing just wants to kill this dude. Van Helsing, I don't think, gives a shit about Mina. And I mean, right? Don't you get that impression?
Yeah. He's kind of like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, he's there to kill a vampire.
Well, he's also ready to kill her, remember? Like, he opens the second coffin, and he's like, oh, she's not even here. Okay, I guess I'll go back to Dracula then. Like, I'm going to kill her first, and then we kill Dracula.
See him find the coffin, but then we cut to Jonathan finding Mina, and then Van Helsing just shows up, and he's like, oh, it's over, Dracula's dead. It's like, what? That's how you're going to end?
Yeah.
And that's how the movie ends. Mina is okay, Dracula is dead, and that's it.
But, the ending of this, it's upsetting because this is another one of those Universal monster movies that ends abruptly. Like all of the ones that we've done anyways.
I think they all do that. I really think the Wolfman might be the most egregious. Pretty sure they all end abruptly. Some of them feel kind of earned, though. And this one, to me, doesn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, The Invisible Man ended abruptly, but it ended with, like, some kind of closure.
Yeah, that's one of the better endings, I think.
But the whole thing with this ending, with Dracula being staked to death, it's all off screen, but you can hear him kind of groaning. But did you notice that every time Bela Lugosi was supposed to be on screen acting or doing something, he was never, like, they always cut away, or he was never shown, like, climbing out of the coffin, I mean. He wasn't shown getting staked through the heart. I'm sure they could have done something like that.
Well, the staking through the heart is probably like a matter of this might have been just too gruesome for audiences.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that.
And as for the climbing out of the coffin, yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I know you don't see him climbing out. Are you accusing Bela Lugosi of laziness, or?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like he was like,
a crippling heroin addiction that didn't allow him to physically act. Maybe.
Yeah, well, like, because I'm trying to think. I think it was the first scene when we see him wake up, come out of his coffin in Carfax Abbey.
We see him carrying Mina, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, that should have been easy enough, I guess, for him. Yeah, climbing out of his coffin, you see a hand come out of the coffin, then the camera kind of like pans away, then when it pans back, you hear a slam of the wooden coffin top, and Bela Lugosi's standing there. And I'm like, oh, you couldn't have climbed out of that fucking coffin? Is this, maybe it was just like a directing decision? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
What about how Dwight Fry is killed by a hug, and then thrown down the stairs?
It's fine. I mean, you want something a little bit more exciting, of course, but it's fine. It's the most on-screen death we have.
Yeah.
It's the only on-screen death we have, really. Well, sort of the flower girl a little bit.
How did you feel about the side story about Lucy that went literally nowhere?
Lucy was in the movie for 90 seconds, and then she died.
Well, she came back and had apparently been murdering babies.
Oh, yeah, that's mentioned. Yeah, okay.
And then,
yeah, I see what you mean. It's a lot like most of the Renfield stuff. It's more just talked about. It doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
I feel like this movie should have, and I'm not just saying this because it's just a short movie in general, but they blow through the story. With the exception of Van Helsing, you meet basically every single character in this movie like 20 minutes into it.
Mm-hmm.
I think this movie should have been a good 20 or 30 minutes longer, and I think it would have been better. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't know if it would have been better, because my favorite stuff in it was the stuff in Transylvania.
Well, you can expand upon that, though, too. You don't have to have the bat show up and have him just faint, and then that's it.
Yeah, you're right.
In the book, Jonathan Harker is there for like several days, if not weeks, and he'll like look out the window and see Dracula climbing up the castle walls on the outside like a fucking animal. I mean, they probably couldn't pull that stuff off in 1931, no. But you can do creepy stuff like that where he slowly becomes more and more suspicious of like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
Instead, Renfield's kind of just unaware, and then all of a sudden I'm not even sure if he's a vampire. He's just like a vampire servant. Well, I guess he is a vampire because his blood tested positive for vampirism. Thank you, Dr. Van Helsing, but yeah.
I also like that when Renfield shows up at Castle Dracula, after he gives himself that paper cut, and Dracula kind of lunges at him and then jumps back because of the cross, the crucifix. He mistakes it for Dracula being afraid of blood when he just heard a whole village full of villagers say, he's a vampire, there are vampires up there, you should be terrified. Yeah. I don't know.
That's fair. So what do you think of the movie overall?
Overall, it's all right. It's my least favorite of the Universal monster movies that we've done so far.
Of the three, I think it's by far the worst of the three, but I agree with that.
Yeah, I just feel like...
It's also the only one not directed by James Whale so far. That's not a coincidence, folks. James Whale was a good director, a very good director.
Who directed this?
Todd Browning, who directed Freaks, and I think I've seen 3 movies by him. I mean, he did some other vampire movie with Bela Lugosi that I've seen that I don't believe was a Universal movie. Freaks is Todd Browning's masterpiece. The Dracula is not nearly as good as Freaks.
I just feel like Dracula's kind of boring, but I don't really want to use that word. But I don't know, it's like lackluster or something.
It's methodical. It's methodical in its pacing. No, I would use the word boring, but not to say it's like the entire thing is boring. But it's definitely not that exciting. You want something more out of this movie. And I think it's even just like the lack of musical score. It feels like an old movie, and the way certain things are edited around. And I just don't recall those issues with Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Frankenstein felt less like a filmed play than this.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if this feels even more like a play. Like, as you brought up the editing, there's just like a lot of cuts to a completely different scene, or like where Dracula walks into London. It's like, how did he get there from a ship in Whitby? You know, did he fly there as a bat? Did he take a carriage? Did he whatever? I don't know. If it just needs to be like more fluid from like in scene changes or scene transitions or something.
You got to have more newspapers to transition. Imagine if every scene was like, newspaper, Dracula has arrived in London. That's just
oh my God, I'd be so upset. And then again, that whole kind of like side story with Lucy. Like at one point, because I think at one point we see her walking in the woods, and then we see like a constable roll up on a bicycle because he hears some kids crying. And then they talk about this like rash. And then, what's his name? That Cockney mental patient handler guy. He's reading the paper to these women behind a desk. And he's like, oh yeah, 2 little kids were attacked last night. They were bitten after they were lured into the woods with some chocolate by a woman in a white dress. Oh, what's going on there? I don't know. That just goes nowhere. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like this movie should be more than it is. It's a movie that for me, I kind of really mostly just appreciate it for Bela Lugosi and Dwight Frye.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of the castle sets and stuff like that. The rest of the movie I could kind of take or leave. So I'm thinking good movie, not a great movie. Are you in agreement there?
Yeah, good movie, not a great movie. Definitely one to watch if you haven't seen it though, just to say.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I've
it's a
Dracula.
necessary watch. Like you can't, like you don't even have to be like a horror fan. If you're like a film person. It's just like, yeah, you gotta fucking watch Dracula. It's like it's like you can't say you enjoy films and live your entire life without seeing like The Wizard of Oz. You know, there's like certain movies that it's just like you have to see it. This one, no, it's no Wizard of Oz, don't get me wrong, but it's 70 minutes. You know, give it a chance.
Exactly, yeah. Take 70 minutes out of your life, you know, and watch it. Good movie. Give it a watch. Not a great movie, but you know what is a great movie? I think everybody should watch. The Big Dollhouse. From 1971, this is a women in prison movie, and I definitely thought this was going to have more nudity in it when you first described it to me. I had never seen a women in prison movie before.
First of all, I never really described it to you. I just said it's a women in prison movie. I think that's all I said.
Yeah, I think you said it's a women in prison movie with Pam Grier. And I was like, no.
Yeah, I mentioned Pam Grier. Okay.
Yeah, I was like,
no, I said Sid Haig also.
Oh, you did? Yeah, that's right. And then you told me it was directed by, what's his name, Jack Hill?
Jack Hill. No, but this is because this is one of the few movies that we've done so far that I hadn't seen before. So I couldn't really have been more descriptive than I was.
Okay. Yeah, well, when I turned it on, I was like, oh, no, there's going to be, like, uncomfortable rape or, like
I will say this movie
rape.
was not as rapey as I was expecting. It was not as rapey as it could have been. It's a little rapey. There's a lot more talk about rape than there is rape.
Yeah, also...
Which I guess is good. I mean, if it's one or the other, I would rather that.
Also, give me a second here. I want to look up where it was filmed.
Oh, yeah, where is it set, even?
I think it's set somewhere in like Vietnam area or something like that.
I was thinking like Nicaragua even, but okay.
Oh yeah. Well, there were lots of people who looked. Oh, they're in the Philippines.
Oh well, that makes sense. This is an American Filipino production.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That might mean $5 came from Philippine investors. Who knows? But the Philippines, if you're not familiar, they were big into exploitation movies. You have like a movie like Raw Force is a great example of like Filipino kind of action movies were kind of their own breed. I haven't seen too many of them. And this I wouldn't really call this an action movie. It kind of becomes like a girls with guns type movie for like the last 15 minutes, but
yeah. Okay, so that's enough talking about it. Let's get into it. The Big Dollhouse. We open with this awesome song, which is sung by Pam Grier.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she sang it. I found it on YouTube.
No way.
It's great. I'll send it to you after.
It's a good song. I liked it.
We're introduced sort of to these three women in very 70s clothing who are driven to this women's prison in a bamboo cage. I laughed so hard when I saw that. I don't know why. Maybe because this is like the same era as like Vietnam, you know? I just thought it was really funny.
Oh, and I think Vietnam POWs are funny. Is that what you're saying?
Anyways, they get taken to this prison, and they get out and are immediately roughed up by the guards there. They are, I will call, finger inspected by the guards.
Oh, yeah,
rather roughly.
leg spread and everything, yeah.
Yeah. And the main character out of these three women that are brought, what's her name? Collier? She was thrown in prison for murder. We later find out she killed her husband, who happened to be gay and was banging a houseboy, and she was also banging the houseboy. But pretty quickly, we learned that there is like this weird kind of like this prison's almost like for like political prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting too far ahead of myself though, because we meet this doctor, really nice guy. I forget his name though. It's his first day at this women's prison as well. He seems nice, and he gives Collier a quick once-over before the guards rip her away and throw her into a cell with like 5 other women. One of whom is Pam Grier, beautiful, beautiful black lady who I think probably her last movie was Jackie Brown. Maybe that might have been her last movie.
She's been acting for 25 years since then. I don't think that's her last movie.
Oh, was it? I thought she kind of retired. I thought she was dead, to be honest.
No, she was like trending on Twitter recently. I don't know why. She was dead? Though, and I think people were worried she was dead because that's how it always works when when older celebrities trend on Twitter. That people are like, "Oh shit!" It's like, no, you guys. It's just Paul McCartney's got a new album out. He's not dead, you know.
So Collier has to kind of quickly fit in with all these women in prison, and Pam Grier quickly makes Collier her prison bitch.
Pam Grier, who plays a character named Grier.
Grier, yeah.
That's just weird.
Yeah, is it weird or was it easy for like the director? Yeah, well, your name's Grier.
I mean, yeah, but it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely kept on thinking they were going to call her Pam. That night in prison, Collier is set on fire by this crazy inmate who accuses her of being a spy, and then all the women in the prison gang up on her and give her a swirly until the strongest woman in the cell breaks it up and is like, look, she's just a scared kid, okay? And we also learned that there was a woman who had occupied this bed that Collier slept on before, and she was killed recently. And then we cut to the next day where we see this woman who died. She's being cremated, and this one lady prisoner comes forward and she's talking to the warden, who's like reading like some kind of sorrowful poem, and her name's Alcott, and she says, look, I don't think my friend was killed trying to escape. And she says this right to the warden, who is German. That kind of prison. Oh, yes, the wardress.
Her name tag or whatever says, like, head wardress, which that's not a word I'm familiar with. I'm not sure if it is a word. It probably is.
Yeah, maybe it's a word in the Philippines. But yeah, so this seemingly nice German woman runs this work camp / prison, which, let's not get too into the Germans and camps. But,
oh, yeah, the Germans enjoy, like, tents and camping outside. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Germans are big on s'mores.
Yeah. Also, I want to point out, this might sound like I'm kind of jumping around a bit, but also the movie's edited much in the same way as I would say Dracula was edited, where you just kind of get cuts to scenes. Because while
it's a low budget movie,
yes,
it's a low budget movie, and it feels that way, but in a way that I kind of like. I'll take a low budget movie. For certain genres are meant to be low budget, where you don't want to see them like heavily produced. In a women in prison exploitation movie, I don't want to see a $50 million version of this movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't want to see James Cameron make his, or James Cameron or Christopher Nolan or Zack Snyder make their women in prison exploitation movie.
Oh,
I want this shit shot cheaply, and I'm seeing something like $125,000, $150,000 for this movie. It's like, okay,
yeah, maybe even less. So after this quick little funeral service, these two random dudes roll up in a Jeep to the prison. They're bringing what I thought at first was produce, but it's actually like a food cart.
Yeah, and one of them's Sid Haig, who's got hair.
Yeah.
I commented, because he was bald in Spider Baby, and it's like, oh, I guess he's always been bald, but like, because he had the shaved head look in here. But no, I mean, he wears a hat like the entire movie, but he's got some thick hair, at least on the side, and he's got some burns.
The only time you see him take his hat off, you can actually see a bald spot on the back of his head, but that's at the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these guys come into the prison to sell food to the prisoners, food and cigs and stuff like that. And Sid Haig has this plan or this idea that he wants to be raped by a woman in prison. He wants to get with one of these women, but his whole plan is like, oh, they're all so horny in here. I'm just going to wait till one of them rapes me, you know?
Yeah, well, because the exchange, it was something like, oh, what are you saying? You're going to rape them? And he's like, no, they're going to rape me. And I don't think he means like literally. I think he meant like they're just going to come on to me because they just can't control themselves and I'm just going to roll with it.
Yes, yeah.
I think that's what he means, but I'm not sure.
I hope that's what he means.
Well, again, going back to, there's more talk about rape than there is rape, and I'll take it. If it has to be one or the other, I will take that. In like I said, I haven't seen a lot of women in prison movies. I've seen like 3 or 4. I'll say this up front. This is the best one I've seen. This is you've commented on how you love it. I haven't really said anything. I enjoy this movie enough. It's interesting, and it gets pretty entertaining at times.
Yeah.
And it's also, I mean, it's sleazy, but it's not as like...
You don't feel gross.
You want to shower after it. You don't want to shower during it.
Yeah. Yeah,
and there are certain movies. Some of the... I can't remember the name of them, but like Linda Blair made some like women in prison movie in the 80s, and that one I like showered 3 times watching it. I was just like, what is this? Is fucking... what is this? Linda Blair, Sybil Danning. It's like, oh no.
Oh no. Those
yeah,
poor
this isn't
people.
that.
Well, you know, the only other women in prison movie I've seen is Escape Plan with Sly Stallone and...
Sly Stallone's my favorite woman in prison.
Yeah, exactly. It's Sly Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. They're on like a prison boat, I'm pretty sure.
Where's the women part?
No, they are the women. That's...
Well, if you're making a joke, why not go like Shawshank or something? Any other prison movie would make more sense.
Well, I wanted to pick like the manliest men and call them women.
Okay. You don't think Morgan Freeman's manly is what you're saying?
No, I think Morgan Freeman's really manly. He's got one of the best voices in Hollywood.
What about Orange is the New Black? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen a few episodes.
I saw like 2 episodes of that, and then I'm like, this show's never going to have a plot, is it? And I'm like, okay, I'm not interested. Like, it's not bad. I'm not saying it's a bad show, but I'm just like, not for me. I want a plot.
And luckily, we get that here. We go back to Harry and Man. I forget his name. It's like Fred or something. They take their little food cart to the main women, the main character's cell. He tells Pam Grier that he's got a letter. Sid Haig does. He tells Pam Grier, he's like, hey, I got a letter for you. It's made it past the censors. What'll you do for it? So she lets him grope her under her shirt, which I would prefer to see that than poor Pam Grier taking off all of her clothes.
Sure.
Then somehow one of the cellmates, Bodine, because like the letter's for her, and then they go out to work on like a rice paddy, and while she's bent over, the head guard pulls her out of this rice paddy and reaches down her top and pulls out this letter. So she hauls her away to this kind of like torture chamber where this head guard, she literally lets her hair down for this, where she strings her up in front of this strange masked man who sits at the other end of the room and just proceeds to like whip her. This quickly turned into 50 Shades of Grey.
Okay, yeah. There's a little, I'm just thinking with the mask, there's a little Eyes Wide Shut too.
Oh, yes.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so Bodine's pretty
Friday the
roughed
13th part 2.
No, there's nobody in a wheelchair rolling backwards down a mile-long set of stairs. Bodine gets taken back to her cell after she's pretty roughed up. She's beaten up pretty badly. And I think this is when some of the prisoners decide to try to escape. And if this isn't when they decide to try to escape, a lot of other women go to have a shower. Where, Collier's Grier's bitch.
Not to sound like a pervert, but I like the shower scene.
The shower scene was actually, I was going to say the same thing. I'm glad you said it, and I'm glad you prefaced that with saying, I don't want to sound like a pervert, but...
Yeah, because, Pam Grier has her, she has her
bitch,
she orders
Collier.
that one girl to, wash her, and then Pam Grier just goes away, and then so she goes up to this other woman and starts washing her, and
Don't
she
fucking
turns
touch
around
me.
and it's like, what's wrong with you? I can do this myself. She's like, I just want to make friends. And I'm thinking, that's how you make friends?
Yeah, I think she says, I don't want to do things for Grier anymore. I want to hang out with other people. I was like, oh, poor lady. Yeah, so they're having this shower, and all the characters leave from the shower except for Alcott, this blonde woman. And while she's showering, Fred, the other guy who's working with Sid Haig, he stops by and looks through this frosted glass, and he can just sort of see her, I guess. And he's really not secretive about peeping through the glass at her. He's got his nose and half his face pressed up to the glass to see through.
It's like Ted Raimi in Dr. Alien.
Yeah. And Alcott's super into this because she was just complaining how, she wants a man in prison. That's the thing she most from being in the... That's the thing she misses the most from being in the outside world. It's men. So when she's done from her shower, she goes and steals a knife and then forces this guy to have sex with her in a storeroom.
But it's not Sid Haig. It could have been... She could have wrote Sid Haig.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he missed it because he was doing paperwork or whatever the hell he said he was going to do.
He's Sid Haig. He was off murdering somebody.
Yeah. Alcott and Fred get caught, and she also, I guess Alcott then gets dragged to this torture room where I laughed so fucking hard when this happened.
Oh.
It's because she's taken to this torture room, for fucking a dude, but it cuts to her and she's tied to a table and she's got electrodes on her boobs.
Yeah, that was weird. Yeah.
I laughed so hard.
Kind of Frankenstein looking.
Yeah. It was great. And
I thought we were going to have because again, this is the first time I'd ever seen this movie. I thought we were going to have a weird ass sci-fi twist at that point. And we just don't. It's just the it's just the costume. Weird. It's just the set they had. I don't know.
Yeah, and and going back to what you said earlier about this movie being dirty, everything in this movie looks dirty. The entirety of the set looks dirty.
Oh yeah,
they're in a half rundown
again,
building.
That's where you want a movie like this to be low budget. If this is a higher budget movie, they clean that shit up and it's not as effective.
I agree. But again, while she's getting tortured, there's this guy in this black
hood.
There's a
creepy pervert in the corner.
Yeah, bending a whip and smacking it against his leg, like a real freak. Alcott gets released, and she's out in the yard talking to a bunch of other women, and she's like, "Hey, we gotta escape because I'm tired of this shit. I don't like being here." And they grab Collier, who was being Pam Grier's bitch again, and they haul her away, and they say, "Hey, you want to escape too?" But then they get caught by Pam Grier asking her questions, I guess. And Grier wants to fight Alcott for Collier, and whoever wins gets to keep
fantastic.
Collier. Like, so I don't know, work detail. They all kind of like go into this muddy area of like a cornfield or something, wherever the hell they are.
Well, at first it's just the cornfield. It ends up in the mud later.
Yes, you're right. This cool kind of like groovy song starts playing, and Pam Grier just fucking boots this woman right in the gut, and she falls over, and then they start fighting, and they roll around, and Alcott gets thrown into like this muddy rice patty, pardon me, and then somebody pushes Pam Grier in, so it just turns into like kind of sexy mud wrestling, and I thought, oh man, if this was any other movie, their clothes would have been off already. But kudos to this movie, they kept their clothes on the whole time.
That's only kind of true. Pam Grier's shirt is definitely coming off at the chest area, but she's so covered in mud, you can't really tell. I mean,
Thanks, yeah.
You can if you're looking for it, so I'm going to shut up now, but...
Sorry, what was that, Patrick? Could you repeat that?
I don't know. We were talking about the shower scene? What?
Yeah, shower scene. My favorite scene. I mean, what? Yeah, so Alcott wins. She almost suffocates
Which
Pam
is
Grier.
an upset. Pam Grier was kicking her ass early in the fight.
So Grier says, okay, Alcott, you win. You get Collier as your bitch. She can do whatever you want now. She's like, awesome, cool. So they all go back to the cell and they start planning an escape. And there's really only 2 members in the cell that aren't really part of the escape plan. And that's Pam Grier, who's willing to help. And then there's like this drugged up cellmate who has just been like laying on her bed most of the movie. She's, what is she, like a heroin junkie or something?
Yeah, it's heroin.
Yeah, so...
She got it from Bela Lugosi.
Yeah. Oh, poor Bela Lugosi.
Just don't worry, he was long dead by 7.
Yeah. So part of this escape plan is that most of the women have to get thrown in the hot box together, which is just like a steam room. So they start a food fight in the cafeteria, and they all get hauled away into the hot box. And I think Pam Grier gets caught. I'm starting to get like a little fuzzy in this part. There's so many things are going on. Pam Grier gets caught by like the main guard while she's snooping around the office for like keys or something.
Yeah, that's right.
But she just says...
it's the wardress, isn't it?
Yes,
Not
yeah.
the guard, but yeah.
Oh, no. Oh, you're right. It was the wardress, yeah. But the main guard catches her, and they get the information out of her that there's going to be an escape, but that's it. She doesn't say anything else. There's going to be an escape. But she's also told Harry, a.k.a. Sid Haig, to come by later because she's going to give him the goods. You know what I mean? She's going to, Pam Grier, one of the sexiest ladies alive in the 70s, she's going to give Sid Haig the goods when he comes back later tonight.
Sid Haig, one of the least sexy men alive in the 70s. I'm sorry, Sid Haig.
Poor Sid Haig.
He looks better here than he did in Spider Baby, because in Spider Baby they have him. I mean, that's just the character. He's this mentally insufficient man-child.
So the whole point of the plan is that there's something to do with...
hang on, if I may interrupt you.
Yeah, let's go right ahead.
This reminds me a bit of like Hanny Calder from another 1971 movie, which is just like, it's a Western that's just genius casting. It's Raquel Welch versus like Ernest Borgnine. It's just like both sides of this beauty spectrum.
Oh no.
That's kind of what's going on here.
Or like, I love John Candy. I love him to death. But any movie where he's with like this really attractive woman.
When's he with a really attractive woman? Like Uncle Buck, it's just the woman from Field of Dreams. She's not like a smoke show.
The Great Outdoors. His wife's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, I guess I think I've seen that movie, but not in a long time.
What's the other one too, where like his mom
is really hot?
No, where he's like trying to date this woman, but his mom won't let him. But she's gorgeous too.
I don't know. I don't know that one. I'm not as well being
Splash?
a non-Canadian.
John Candy's in Splash.
He is. Yeah, he's Tom Hanks' brother in that, right?
yeah. I think that was his first big role for a movie. Anyways.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's not a big role, but he is in Blues Brothers. It's a fairly small role though.
Yeah, was Blues Brothers before Splash?
Yes,
It must have been, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Splash was like Bosom Buddies days for Tom Hanks. Or if it wasn't Bosom Buddies days, it was, Blues Brothers was like He Knows You're Alone type days for Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks was not a star when Blues Brothers came out.
No, when did Blues Brothers come out? Was that the...
1980. Belushi died in like 82 or something, so Belushi died before Tom Hanks was a big star, I think.
Wasn't it cocaine? And that's kind of what maybe
John Belushi takes the Pepsi Challenge.
Shut up. Isn't that also what killed John Candy? Cocaine and being overweight? Well, apparently he was...
I thought it was mostly
he died.
I thought he just... I didn't think it was drugs. I thought it was just like a heart attack.
No, yeah, I think that's what they were saying.
Overweight. I think he was a heavy smoker, too.
Yeah, he smoked like a pack a day. Also, he was out filming in Mexico, wasn't it, for this whatever like shitty movie he was going to be in?
I don't know.
And he didn't
Again,
want to do
as
it.
I was saying, as a non-Canadian, I'm not as well versed in my John Candy trivia.
Before we get back to this, I was watching Uncle Buck last night. One of my favorite scenes in that movie is when he goes outside, like after he like goes to the house, he goes outside because there's like a cat meowing. And he's like, "Come on, get in here. What are you doing out here? Stop meowing at me. What are you doing? Stop scratching me. Just get inside the house." And he walks inside. He's like, "Who let the cat out?" And the kid's like, "We don't have a cat." It's like, get out of here. Shoo, get away. Get.
So I saw Uncle Buck for the first time relatively recently, like a couple months ago. And I kind of liked it. I thought it was okay. It wasn't great. But Buck is a narc. He's just an asshole. Like, let the 17-year-old niece have some fun. What's wrong with you?
Well, remember the whole point of the movie is he wants his brother to like him again. Because they have such a damaged relationship. Because Buck is nothing but a fucking screw up. So he wants to make sure all of this goes smoothly.
The Buck character is fun, but the almost like possessive nature he has over his niece is kind of fucking creepy after a while.
Yeah, because I was watching.
I like his relationship in that movie with Culkin, Macaulay Culkin more because that's less creepy and it's more cute.
Yeah. Now, do you remember this line? Because I was watching it on fucking something like AMC.
Oh God, I'm gonna have to label this as an episode on
Uncle Buck.
Dracula and Uncle Buck, aren't I?
Yeah. Okay, now hold on. One more thing, because you watched this relatively recently. I was watching it on like a fucking censored TV channel, like a censored American TV channel. And the bit where he's talking to his niece, she says something like, "I'm going to go out tonight." And he goes, "Hey, I'm going to be here for one more day, then you can go and do whatever the hell you want." She's like, "Come on, Buck. How's that fair?" And he turns around, and in the movie on this channel, he said, "Hey, get screwed on your own time," or something like that. But I think originally he said, "Hey, get fucked on your own time." But I don't remember. Do you remember?
I want to say there was like a surprising fuck drop in that movie, but I don't remember in what context it was.
Okay.
I want to say it's like, I thought this was like a family-friendly movie, and then all of a sudden there's rape, and there's an F-bomb somewhere, and it's like, what is this? It's like Dr. Alien, where it's just switching from tones.
Yeah. Okay, where was I about the... Oh yeah, the escape plan. So
Sid Haig and Pam Grier.
Yeah. Yeah, so also Pam Grier has this other role to play in the escape plan because I guess she's going to she's going to lure Harry, aka Sid Haig, to the prison so that they can take his Jeep to get out of there. But she has like this other thing that she has to do. It has to do with the cat. Do you remember what that is? I got fuzzy on that. Doesn't matter then. So all the women are in the hot box waiting for Pam Grier to let them out. And is it Collier gets pulled out? And she's getting tortured by the head guard and...
creepy pervert in the corner.
Yeah, except because that person isn't there yet, because as we learn in this scene, that pervert is actually the wardress herself, who everybody thought it was a man, but oh my god, big shock, which, I mean, I think I saw that coming a mile away. I don't know about you.
Well, I saw it coming when they had the scene where the wardress was meeting with someone and some guy, and he's like, they tell me that there's this man that they have hanging around the prison when women go and get tortured. What do you know about this? And she's just like, "Oh, well, no men are allowed in at that time." And it's like, okay, it's her then. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Or I think she's like, "No, you were the only man here at that time." And he's probably like, and he's like, "Hey, what about lunch?" He just like changes the subject.
So Collier's getting tortured. We realize that this creepy guy is the wardress, and unfortunately for Pam Grier, she gets fucking stabbed in the neck by her heroin junkie cellmate because she was going to refuse to take her junkie cellmate with her when they're escaping because her junkie cellmate is no use for anything. And Harry finds her body and quickly leaves. So he runs out to his Jeep to hop in it to start it. But bam, all these women jump out and they've got like pistols and a submachine gun and they've got the doctor tied up and they've got the wardress tied to the floor in like the bed of the Jeep. And they're escaping the prison. This is kind of like the pre-gunfight to a bigger gunfight.
Yeah, that's fair.
Where the guards have all the doors or have the main door barred, and the women are like, "Hey, we've got the doctor and we've got the wardress here. Open up or we're going to shoot him." And they take the gag off the wardress and she goes, "Kill them! Don't let them out!" So everybody starts unloading on the Jeep and they're firing back, which is pretty awesome. But they get out and make it to a lovely babbling brook. And here the doctor's untied and they're talking to him and everybody's relaxing and all the women have taken Sid Haig's and other guys' clothes and they're going to drive away in the Jeep. But they're going to leave the wardress for Sid Haig to rape for some reason. And just as Sid Haig takes his hat off and he's about to get busy, a bunch of guards from the prison show up out of nowhere. They've got everybody at gunpoint. One of the women, she'd been shot in the arm earlier during their escape, and she wasn't going to make it. So she busts out these 2 World War II grease guns, and she just starts fucking firing at everybody, blowing everybody away.
This was my favorite shot of the movie. I love because she's got like some kind of like jacket on that's like covering her.
Yeah.
And she just kind of like lets it fall, and then it's revealed 1, her arm is covered in blood, and 2, she's got these 2 big guns. That I loved that shot. It was so
it's
awesome.
Great. She just starts blowing everybody away left and right.
I feel like that one shot is responsible for the entirety of Quentin Tarantino's career.
Patrick, also something I'm glad you said, because yes, I was going to say that too. I was absolutely going to say that. Watching that, I'm like,
Go
where
back
did Tarantino
to the video
get his eyes
store,
from?
you hack.
Yeah, you know when he was working at the video store, he was like, hey, so you guys got to watch this movie, okay? It's got Pam Grier, absolutely fucking awesome, okay? Pam Grier,
the man just
lots of chicks
loves
with guns.
anything from the 70s, basically. He's like the Stranger Things guys, but just a decade earlier.
Yeah, it's exactly it.
A little bit of the 60s, too, with the spaghetti westerns, which went into the 70s, but, they were better in the 60s.
Well, Tarantino, hack, we can move on. Yeah, so this big firefight is just out of control. There's like dozens of guards, and Alcott, she's got a pistol, and she's firing frantically back at everybody else. But unfortunately, I think Alcott is shot in the gut. She rolls into a ditch. The woman with the grease guns, she's shot and killed. And all the guards show up.
But she didn't have much of a chance. She's not even in cover when she pulls out those guns. She knows she's going down.
No, exactly, yeah. So all the guards approach them, and they kind of save the doctor, who wasn't really in danger because all the women liked him, but they're about to untie the wardress, and the doctor says, hey, you can't untie her because she's literally fucking insane. She's like psychotic, and I can prove it when we get back because she has a torture room. And she goes, no, doctor,
well, she's got sci-fi devices.
Yeah. Yeah, and a snake that hangs from the ceiling.
Oh yeah, we didn't mention the snake, did we? That part was awesome.
No, yeah, was that the Collier part?
I can't remember. I got most of the women mixed up. I got all the white women mixed up, and they're all white except for Pam Grier. So
I put that on a shirt. I got all the white women mixed up. Well, the wardress tries to turn the tables on the doctor. She goes, no. The crazy one here is the doctor. You should arrest him and throw him in prison. And as they're kind of bickering back and forth, gas has been leaking from the Jeep, and Alcott, who's half dead laying in a ditch, lights a lighter and just tosses it towards the Jeep. The whole thing just explodes, and the wardress is killed, and the doctor helps Alcott kind of walk away. Presumably, they're going back to the prison. It's weird because the whole time the doctor's like, I'm going to take you guys back to prison. Under my supervision, the prison will be better. And they're like, no, we don't want to go back. But the woman, Collier, she's given a letter by the woman with the grease guns who dies. And she says, you got to take this to my boyfriend who's like hiding from government forces in the jungle somewhere. He has to get this. So as the Jeep explodes and stuff, she runs away. So the doctor's helping Alcott get up. But Collier has escaped to a road where she like flags down a guy in a Jeep. She hops in and he goes, where are you going to? Yeah, and she's like, anywhere you want, baby. He goes, oh, I'm so glad you said that, Miss Collier, because we're going back to prison. We've been looking for you all afternoon. And
who was that guy then?
Dude, some random fucking guy. Random fucking guy.
I was like, was it Sid Haig's buddy?
I don't think so, because he was wearing underwear the last time we saw him.
The man can put on clothes. He's got time, but yeah.
Well, the women were all wearing his clothes.
Well, yeah, anyways, hey, we're done, right?
Yeah, so what'd you think about the big dollhouse there, Patrick?
I thought it was all right. It was pretty good. Not too long ago, I saw another women in prison movie, also featuring Pam Grier, and in that one, Pam Grier was like a psychopathic warden that tortured people, and I think maybe even had sex with them, and I'm like, okay. I enjoyed this more than that, as enticing as that sounds. I can't even remember the name. They all have, a lot of them have weird titles. I mean, some of the titles stand out, like Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS stands out. I haven't seen that one, but Bear Behind Bars is a title that stands out to me.
Oh, no.
I have seen that one. It's a Brazilian movie. This is the best women in prison movie I've seen. I haven't seen that many. I've seen Reform School Girls, which isn't technically a prison, but same gist, you know. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's entertaining. The characters, I don't have they have personality. I think they're written in kind of a fun way where even if you mix them up here and there, like there's still some fun dynamics going on.
Yeah.
Again, it's exploitation, but I don't feel like the women are being exploited so much, and that's important. We've talked about this a little bit, but like I don't want to watch a movie where I feel uncomfortable for every actress on screen.
Yeah.
I mean, there's, 7, 8 women in this movie who are naked. There's good chance one or two of them felt incredibly uncomfortable about this whole experience. But, like, I don't know. I feel like Pam Grier owned it, you know, if nothing else.
Yeah, I know, because the nudity about this, because you're right, it is an exploitative movie, but it doesn't feel, as you said, that way towards women that much.
Yeah, that's the way I felt watching it. Someone might have a completely different view,
right.
And I would get it. I think there's always a fine line with exploitation films. And I would also like to point out that I was looking for this because, you know, Jack Hill, the only other movie I've seen him do is Spider Baby, which is, it's a horror movie, but it's a comedy too. It's a dark comedy. I kept like looking for, is there some comedy here? Is there some satire here? And if there is, I didn't see it. But to be fair, I think even women in prison movies that are considered satirical of the genre, it's hard to tell they're satirical. Like the I think Caged Heat, the Jonathan Demme movie, is considered sort of like a satire of the genre. And one of the points that people talk about, like, oh, they're satirizing the genre because there's like a woman warden that does all the torture. Like, that happens here. And that doesn't feel satirical, does it? You know?
No.
I don't think this is going for satire, but I'm just mentioning that because there are other movies that I feel like don't go for satire, but people still talk about them as if they do. So maybe I'm missing something there and here. Maybe just there, maybe just here. I don't know.
Well, again, going back to something I said at the beginning of this, I was surprised by, I don't want to call it a lack of nudity, but when you hear women in prison,
no, there's a lot of nudity
movie,
here. There's a relative lack of rape, but there's a lot of nudity. Like, they sleep naked. There's the shower scene, which isn't that long.
Yeah, but most of the time, though, I would say that the nudity, I mean, I'm not arguing for wanting more nudity, I guess, in this movie, but I would say
every time someone's tortured, they're naked.
Yeah.
Including the woman who is, like, hanging from, like, the chin-up bar kind of thing.
Most of the time when the women are, like, fully undressed, they are shot from the back, which I thought was nice and might have been slightly comforting to the women on set. The only person who was shot fully nude from the front was the woman who played Alcott, and that was through, like, a pane of frosted glass. So you didn't actually really see anything. But again, women in prison exploitation movie, I don't
really agree with that. I mean, the shower's mostly from the back, but it's not like it's all, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I was just expecting so much more nudity and rape and just feeling uncomfortable both for myself and the women involved. And I walked away thinking like, oh, that wasn't too bad, actually.
And I do think the movie's entertaining, too. It's not just that it's not as rapey as we were kind of expecting. Like, we don't want to say that's the only reason that we kind of like this movie.
Watch it. It's not that rapey.
It's not the bigotry of low expectations. This is a half decent movie. I think I mentioned kind of the writing, the characters are fun. When it becomes an action movie in the last 15 minutes, it's very exciting.
Yeah.
I'd love that shot of that woman pulling those two guns out. Like, that stuff's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this movie does silly. Well, maybe only does silly well because I just couldn't help but like laugh at stuff like that electric bra that woman has to wear, or the fucking bamboo bars. Or like when they show up to the prison.
Bamboo's a powerful wood. It's a strong wood.
Shut up. Or like
have you not seen a Jackie Chan movie where that's like the only thing that keeps him from like falling off a skyscraper?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, Rush Hour 2, I think, right? But, like, even when they show up to the prison at the very beginning, and there's, like, a woman hanging above the doorway in a bamboo cage, I was like, this is so stupid. I really enjoyed it, though. This, as you said, I don't think was, like, satirical. There were a couple, like, funny lines here and there. There were a couple little funny bits, I guess. But for the most part, it was just a decent story, told in a decent way, and then, like, the last 15-ish minutes were pretty awesome. So, give it a watch.
So, Jim, which of these two movies do you prefer? Dracula or The Big Dollhouse?
The Big Dollhouse. Yeah, Dracula was just a little too slow for me. And again, it goes back to Dracula just being a little boring. I never felt like bored in this movie. And that's really what it comes down to for me. How about you?
I'm going to say Dracula. I mean, I've seen Dracula like 100 friggin' times. There are few movies I've seen more than Dracula, and it's not because Dracula is necessarily one of my favorites, but it's like every Halloween, a lot of people like every Halloween, like, oh, you have to watch Nightmare on Elm Street, you have to watch, like, well, Halloween, of course. For me, it was always the old school, the Universal monsters that I had to watch every year, and for the most part still do. I think I might have missed Dracula this past Halloween, but I mean, I've been watching it for 10, 15 years now, so I've seen it way too often, and I don't enjoy it probably as much as I once did, but I also enjoy it more than I did probably a few years ago. And I think it comes down to I enjoy the Dracula Van Helsing scenes. There's only a few of them, but I enjoy those a lot more than I remember having enjoyed them. Like, I think the writing of those scenes is really great. Big Dollhouse was a pleasant surprise, but I think Dracula is a better movie, and I enjoyed it a little bit more. It's relatively close because I don't love Dracula. I don't love either of these movies. I think they're both good. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm not sure if I can explain it much better than that. I just kind of prefer Dracula.
I totally get what you're saying. I mean, I definitely think Dracula's a better
Dwight
movie.
Fry is not in The Big Dollhouse. I'm sorry.
No, you're right. And I mean, The Big Dollhouse, the acting in it is, it's fine. I don't have any problem. But the acting in Dracula,
I thought the war dress kind of sucked. I don't want to say sucked, but I wanted something. I wanted a different performance in that role. I think sadistic German prison war dress. I think you need a bit more over the top performance than what we got.
Yeah, well, in that it's a shame because they were trying to put you off her trail because she was acting so nice.
Yeah, there was supposed to be a mystery there.
Yeah. But no, I mean, there's no acting in The Big Dollhouse that comes anywhere close to what are their names?
Fry.
Bela Lugosi, Dwight Fry, and what's his face, Van Helsing.
Edward Van Sloan. I don't even think Edward Van Sloan's that great, but honestly, I don't think Lugosi gives that great of a performance. It's an iconic performance, but I don't think it's like genuinely great. It's like
no, but it suits the character well.
No, it does, but it's like Schwarzenegger in The Terminator.
Yes, yeah.
Wow, he's perfect for that part, but you can't really say like he did an incredible job or he's a great actor or something.
Yes, yeah, I agree. The Big Dollhouse was just fun. It was a pleasant surprise, and I love that Pam Grier song that she sings. I love that fucking kick to the gut that she gave that woman. And I love the last 15 minutes. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta love a women in prison movie that in theory is going to take place all in this one prison and still finds a way to have an outdoor mud wrestling scene. There's some genuine creativity in the writing to make that work.
Yeah.
So, Jim, how do you think this works as a drive-in double feature?
I think you know my answer. You could guess my answer. I don't think it does work. Just two tonally radically different movies.
That can be fun, though.
It can be fun, and I think the only reason for me that it doesn't work is because a movie from 1931 feels so stiff and uptight and like rigid, even in like
Hey,
filming.
There's some stiffness in the second movie, I'm going to say that.
Yeah, from Sid Haig.
I'm not Sid Haig, just the viewer. Okay, let me make my case. This is a good drive-in double feature. Here it is. Well, first of all, completely different eras, which I agree doesn't always work, but it's also neat to kind of see the evolution of, I can't even say exploitation film because Dracula is so not an exploitation film, but it's a drive-in film. It's a vampire. It's Dwight Fry acting crazy. Like that performance fits in with like a exploitation movie from the 70s. Like he could be a member of the family in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something with that performance.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so what does Dracula give us? We get, again, 30s horror movie, so we don't actually get scares, but you get horror, vampires,
yes,
gothic horror, gothic atmosphere, crazy performances, creepy Bela Lugosi staring at people for 45 minutes. With The Big Dollhouse, you kind of get everything else that you want. You get sex, you get nudity, you get action. Like you don't think this is going to turn into a Girls with Guns movie. It does for the last 10 or 15 minutes, which I thought was the best part of the movie. I liked the fight scene though too. And then and it's kind of a torture porn movie in a more of a literal sense than like a Saw or a Hostel.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like the different eras matching up here where we see this pre-code horror movie that's incredibly tame for the pre-code era. Again, reminder, Todd Browning made Freaks, which is a fucking insane movie, especially compared to Dracula, which is a pretty, straightforward endeavor. And then you get a little, you get to see a little bit of the creativity of the weird-ass late 60s, early 70s independent filmmaker just doing his own thing. I mean, this movie didn't feel anything like Spider Baby, but at the same time, it felt just like Spider Baby, where it was just like, this is just like a weird guy just doing his thing as a director. You know what I mean? Like, he's just... I don't care
jungle.
I don't care what's commercial or marketable. I'm just going to make my weird-ass movie, and I'm going to get Sid Haig in it. And I want to ask, does this count? Does what we get here count as Sid Haig raping someone? Because we need to establish if we've seen 2 movies where Sid Haig raped someone or just one.
Well,
because
it's
Spider
definitely...
Baby, we agreed he did.
Okay, I don't want to get too explicit here. I don't think there's penetration, but there's definitely him grinding up on a woman and grabbing her boobs and kissing her.
Sexual assault, if not rape.
Yeah, I'd at least call it
sex
sexual
crime
assault.
having been committed.
Yeah.
Okay, and then he
sex
groped
crime
Pam
Haig.
Grier, and he groped Pam Grier.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Is Sid Haig raping people going to be a theme with every Sid Haig movie we watch? I wonder.
We just have to watch
Hopefully
more.
Not.
You know.
Anyways, but no, I think it's a good drive-in double feature. It's all in all, it's probably 2 hours and 35 minutes or something like that, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
Drive-in double feature that doesn't exhaust you. And it kind of exhilarates you, too, because Dracula's a little boring. The ending is pretty lame. We got an exciting climax in this movie, and this movie overall just a lot more exciting. I won't say more entertaining, but more exciting.
If I wanted Dracula and something kind of... I don't want to say exhilarating. Like, if you wanted to have, like, a horror-esque or, like, a... shit, what's the name of that movie? Oh, fuck.
If we have to pair Dracula with a Pam Grier movie, what movie is it? There is a correct answer.
Oh, no. I've only seen, like, 3 Pam Grier movies.
It's Scream, Blackula, Scream, the sequel to Blackula. Pam Grier's in that. That's the logical one, which is a pretty good movie, actually. I think I like it more than Blackula, and I like Blackula. So
look, if we had to pair it with something like that, yeah. I don't know if you could pair the Big Dollhouse. I mean, in my opinion, I don't know if you could pair the Big Dollhouse with, like... a
classy movie.
Yeah, at all. And I think, like, Dracula
you want it to be sleaze and trash from the beginning?
Exactly, yeah. Like, I think Dracula exudes class just from, like, the period.
And Lugosi's performance, even.
Oh, yeah, of course. From the opening scene, you get, like, this kind of funky 70s song, you know, and fucking bamboo cages, and you're like, oh, I know what movie this is. You know, I'm still out on the it being Dracula. I think Dracula's just slightly too classy.
Kids are bored during Dracula, you think?
Yeah, and they'd be like...
I mean, I wasn't, but yeah, kids suck, so probably.
Yeah, that's good. That's the message for today's episode, everybody. Kids suck. There you go.
All right, so Jim, next time, first of all, we're calling this sort of an end of our season 1. But we will be returning with a new host website, Grandma Sophia's Cookies. That's mostly a music and a cultural blog and website. I encourage you to check them out. They'll be hosting us. When we come back in season 2, we're going to have special guest stars. I mean, that sounds too professional. I mean, these are like people that we know. Like,
let's call them special guest stars.
That's special. I mean, we don't have like Barbara Crampton coming on here. At least to my knowledge. I mean, Barbara, if you're listening... we could talk about Reanimator, but yeah, so I mean, we'll be back. Look for us probably in like September or October. We're going to take some time to record and edit so that we can stick to a very consistent release schedule once season 2 starts up. But we will be actually releasing one more episode for this season, although it won't be on any specific movies. This is going to be our season 1 recap where Jim and I discuss our favorite movies, our favorite moments from the first season, our least favorite movies. Anyways, we're going to be talking about our favorite musical moments, a la Killer Machine from Dr. Alien, and our favorite kills. Mm-hmm. And Jim and I will not be discussing our lists ahead of time, so hopefully we'll have some variety. And that's what's going to be coming up next time. So please feel free to join us. And other than that, we'll see you in season 2.